quick disclaimer, guys. We decided to create this video because we feel that systemic racism is still a very big issue in our society today. Obviously, the election just happened, so we felt that it was really relevant to talk about these issues. I hope you guys enjoy.
What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the Eurosteppers. And for our fifth episode today, we're going to be having a unique episode. Recency. So Joe Biden was elected president of the United States of America. And we thought, kind of with the timing, and the NBA bubble finished a couple of weeks ago, we thought we'd analyze the social justice movement there, what the NBA was able to do there, and their impact on voter turnout. For example, in this past year's election, approximately 146 Americans voted, and that number, with votes still being counted, that number is expected to go up. So that is by far the largest voter turnout in American history. So we thought we were going to analyze that today. And yeah, we're going to start off by talking about the Bucks boycotting their first round game against the Orlando Magic, Game 5. Dad, what did you think of that?
If we go back, so right now, as it stands, Joe Biden has been elected or president-elect of the United States. But if we go back in time to the NBA, the first round of the playoffs, like you said, the Bucks boycotted Game 5 of the first round of the playoffs, and this was definitely the start of a big social movement unveiling within the NBA. And it was, to me, I found it really powerful to see players stepping up and taking action for what they think is right. And it really proved that these are not just athletes, they're more than athletes, kind of like what big players like LeBron, Jimmy Butler, George Hill have been preaching for so long. And this narrative that players should just shut up and dribble, as you've seen by the title of our episode, is definitely not true. And we've seen in the past that these players are able to use their platforms for positive change. So what the Bucks did by boycotting the NBA, and I don't think they're boycotting the NBA specifically, more the idea of systemic racism within the U.S. and how deeply ingrained it is within their history. I think it was really powerful, and it spoke volumes to the kind of players that are within this organization.
Yeah, with the Bucks boycotting their game, 100% I agree with you. Everything's, especially with the bubble too, it's bigger than basketball. I think going into the bubble too, there was a couple players, for example, Kyrie Irving, he's usually outspoken, and Dwight Howard as well. They both said that kind of going back to the bubble would be a distraction, and how they should be focusing on those like social justice issues, and how basketball would be a distraction for it. And even as we know, in the bubble, after the Bucks boycotted their game, there was a big famous meeting. We were getting updates from Woj, and basically, some players like LeBron, there were talks of them canceling the season at that point in total. So what did you think the NBA season was going to be canceled? I think Barack Obama hopped on, told them to continue it. Personally, I think it was their decision to continue. What did you think of that?
Well, I mean, yeah, it was definitely up in the air about whether or not the players were going to totally boycott the NBA and just and cancel play and not finish the playoffs. But I think that a lot of players, for them, it was kind of an escape from reality to play in the NBA. So obviously, even though they were doing their social movements, they were all being a part of the same social movement, which was the whole Black Lives Matter campaign. I think that for a lot of them, like these players, it's still their jobs, and they've got to be there to do what they get paid for, right? So I think that they were able to do their jobs and also be incredible activists off the court as well. So I mean, looking at how it played out, I think they did a fantastic job of basically leading two lives on the court and off the court.
Yeah, and also kind of with the decision to continue the season as well, like the money plays a really big factor, like with the NBA players making millions. I know George Hill, he's been really involved with the community. And a lot of NBA players said how they were going to take that money and invest it back into the youth and to improve systemic racism in the United States. So for sure, I think the money is a really big aspect of them and kind of wanting them to continue the season. And just in players too, someone who really stood out to me was Jaylen Brown in terms of, so the NBA as like a collective group did a really good job, but I thought there was a couple individuals who really like stepped up and kind of led that charge for social change. So yeah, just for me, I thought Jaylen Brown was really impressive. This is someone too who coming out of high school, he was a top 3 recruit, 5-star. He chose to go to Cal Berkeley as well. So that really speaks to his education and his values. You know, before being drafted, some NBA GMs said that he was too smart to play in the NBA, which is actually crazy. And just hearing it, I've like heard him speak at press conferences as well. He's a really good speaker. You know, was one of many players who showed up to the protests in the United States. I know he was in Atlanta. I think he drove like 15 hours to go to Atlanta. And yeah, and basically for Jaylen Brown too, I think that his biggest impact is not going to be on the court, but what he does off the court in general. But yeah, so kind of personally, he was someone who really stood out to me and definitely like inspired me too. Was there any like 1 or 2 NBA players you would say kind of inspired you, or you think you were like really, really like taken away with or blown away by?
No, yeah, I definitely agree about Jaylen Brown. He was is someone that kind of reminds me of Jaylen Brown is Malcolm Brogdon, kind of like that too smart for NBA kind of player. But I think that he was one of the players that definitely led the charge and getting more players involved in this whole social justice movement and really getting players behind this cause. Like I said, Malcolm Brogdon is definitely another player that stood out to me. He went to a lot of protests in Indiana. Definitely, and we saw pictures of him and videos of him protesting in the crowds with these people. So I found that really powerful. You see a lot of celebrities kind of isolate themselves from these crowds, but he was right in there with normal people, being normal just like himself, and he was definitely able to lift the spirits of these people and kind of give them something to hope for leading up to this election. Kind of moving on and talking about how these players like Malcolm Brogdon and Jaylen Brown were able to like lobby for social justice movements. How about we talk a little bit about how that impacted voter turnout? Like if we look at swing states like Wisconsin and Michigan, we saw that historically these are states that are always close. They're either red or they're blue. It's always changing. So what we saw this year or what we see currently is that Wisconsin and Michigan are currently blue. And obviously, usually African-American people are more lean towards democratic movements because obviously we've seen that Joe Biden has made more of an effort to support African-American people and kind of speak to what they need. And he's also been very sympathetic of the whole issue on systemic racism. So I think that a big reason why these states were able to turn blue this election was because we saw the African American population, especially in Wisconsin and Michigan, turn out to vote Democratic, so that they could put someone who they believe would make real change into the White House.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And also, you talked about Michigan, along with Wisconsin being a big swing state, and just something I was reading an article on Twitter the other day. I'm a big Twitter guy. I'm always on Twitter. Davide, you're on Twitter as well a lot too.
I'm getting there. I'm getting into it.
Yeah, but yeah. So I saw a tweet or an article from a news outlet in Michigan, and basically they were talking about kind of how the Detroit Pistons arguably were the reason why Michigan ended up flipping to blue. You know, I think Michigan, they ended up opening their stadium as like a voter like voting booth, and basically because of kind of what the initiatives that Michigan or the Detroit Pistons ran in their arena and getting people out to vote, kind of that was able to, in the cities, they're traditionally more Democratic votes, so that was able to get more votes for Joe Biden, and Joe Biden ultimately ended up winning Michigan. So kind of if you look down the pipeline and like break it up, you can almost trace back Joe Biden's victory in Michigan to the Detroit Pistons, especially if it's close too, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously the Detroit Pistons are not like, it's not to say that they won, like they themselves won Joe Biden,
Yes,
Michigan,
of course
but
not.
I think like kind of talking about how the impact NBA teams had on the voter turnout, for sure. You know, I think all NBA teams, there's a big movement with them getting all their players registered to vote. Some teams had 100%, and probably around the league, either if it was not 100%, it was probably 98%.
Yeah, I know. I think the average is above 90%, like league wide. But anyways, carry on.
Yeah, and basically, yeah, so getting those players to vote as well, I think it had a really big impact on kind of the youth in the basketball community. You know, we saw the NCAA as well. They made election day, they canceled practices and everything. They ran their own campaigns to get all their players on their team to vote. So that definitely kind of played a reason into the results from this election, and the fact that it was by far the largest voter turnout in NBA, or not NBA history, but
U.S.
U.S. election
Yeah.
history.
It's like kind of building up from the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, also in Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Bucks. They were the team that started this, as we said. We saw players like George Hill, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Pat Connaughton, Sterling Brown. All these players show up and devote their time to these protests and peaceful protests within Wisconsin. And kind of building up to this election and getting more, especially African American voters involved, because in the past we've seen that African American populations, especially in these swing states, have declined from voting, or they decided that they did not want to vote. And now we're seeing through statistics that this is the largest turnout, not just for the population as a whole, but specifically for the African American population, especially in these swing states. So yeah, I think that the NBA was not the reason why that Joe Biden won the election, but we can't neglect that these teams did play a role, and they definitely were a big reason why these states were definitely able to turn blue.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, just again, kind of going back to that main message of how it's always bigger than basketball, you know. And it's great to see like these players using their platforms to create real change and kind of inspire the youth and do things that kind of like really mean a lot in this world and are important to them.
Yep.
Moving on, I want to bring up the talking point of talking about the NBA social justice statements on their jersey. You know, I know some NCAA conferences, for example, the Big East in particular, they said they were going to have Black Lives Matter patches on their jerseys this year. Do you think that it's going to be something that will carry over into next season? And even like, do you think we'll see it in other sports? I know we saw in terms of soccer. I know you're a big soccer guy, but in
Yes,
I
sir.
want to say the Premier League or over in Europe, a lot of teams had like Black Lives Matter on their jerseys. But yeah, kind of with the NBA, with that whole movement, that that was the first time we saw players kind of being able to have their own statements on their jerseys, not just ads for money. Do you think? Like, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this carries over to other sports. What do you think?
Well, no, I know that specifically. I can't speak for the Premier League. I'm not really that big of a Premier League fan, but for the Italian soccer league, also known as the Serie A, racism in Italy has been a very big problem recently, or no, throughout its history. And more recently, I believe in the last 3 years, they started a campaign where all of the players wear a black armband that says "Say No to Racism" on it, and it's also within the advertisement banners around the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that the league has started to take very seriously, and there's been very big fines for players or crowds in the stadium that have exhibited instances of racial prejudice or racism in general. Um, I'm speaking directly towards the NBA. I'm not sure. There hasn't been that much talk around whether or not they're going to carry on with the statements on the back of the jerseys like Black Lives Matter or vote. Obviously, the election's done, so it wouldn't make much sense for vote. But other terminology that's similar to Black Lives Matter and that whole social justice movement. I'm not exactly sure whether or not like I said, there hasn't been much talk about it. I personally wouldn't mind it. The thing that I don't understand is like the people that are saying that it doesn't have a place in sports. I think that sport is the one place where, like, on the contrary, I think that sport is the one place where um where color doesn't matter, where race doesn't matter, your gender doesn't matter. Like, people come together and just love the sport that everyone loves. They'll come together and just cheer on these athletes.
Yeah, basically just how like kind of sport and in general basketball is used to like unite people of all races, and even basketball in general too is a sport that is like predominantly, like you look at the makeup of a lot of the NBA teams, is predominantly dominated by the African American community. But yeah, for sure, like I even talked going back to like with Italy, for example. I remember Mario Balotelli from like the I want to say 2010 or 2014, like
I
World
believe
Cup.
around 2012. Yeah.
2012. Okay, yeah. I just remember with that, but yeah.
Yeah, so no, there's always been players, especially African American players in these leagues that have stood out, but it's never really translated into actual like legislation within the leagues. And I think that we're starting to see that really, we're starting to see that a lot more, especially in the NBA. It's still we still have to see what the NFL is willing to do about it. I haven't really seen anything regarding like fines or mass fines or against players or like crowds or the club in general. Hopefully that the players can come together. I'm not even sure if there's a player union in the NFL, but if there is, I would like to see these players come together and kind of lobby against racism and kind of create some legislation that people who are racist in crowds or show racial prejudice are punished for it. But yeah, I think that what the NBA is doing right now is fantastic. They've taken some great steps, but I just don't want to see that diminish. I don't want to see it stop just because the people believe that we have someone in charge that will be very equal in terms of all humans.
Yeah.
um, I don't want to see that slow down. I want to keep seeing progress because the job's not done yet. Like LeBron would famously say.
Yeah, and I think too, like kind of build on what you just said with the next step. I really think that it falls kind of on the owners, the ones with the money, and like owners of NFL teams, NBA teams, the ones at the top. For example, I know, kind of going back to that Milwaukee decision to boycott Game 5. Um, that was after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin, and kind of a big question on social media was how effective was the NBA with creating change, because they have all these platforms, the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and the same stuff is still going on. So kind of after that, I think questions were raised on how do we create real change. It's great to bring awareness of it, but what good is awareness without execution? So and I know they talked about a lot with the owners, kind of investing their money into resources and getting up like initiatives started. So I think kind of moving forward too, and to like kind of build the momentum and keep the progress of what went on in the bubble.
Yeah.
And to keep kind of stepping up and creating real change, I definitely think it falls on the owners. They're the ones who I think are going to play a really big part, and they have the financial resources as well to do so.
Yeah. And like all of these words don't mean anything until we see real change, like in the
Yeah.
legislation of the actual American system. But anyways, moving on from that point, how about we talk a little bit about who we thought had the greatest impact on the NBA, and not as a way of saying like this player did the most and the rest did nothing. Kind of just to highlight one player that you think really stood out throughout the bubble or just in general, like throughout their NBA career.
Yeah, so earlier I said Jaylen Brown, I already talked about him a bit, but another person I would say was Donovan Mitchell, especially with Breonna Taylor, on his social justice statement was say her name. Him, I think Jamal Murray as well were custom cleats, but he was even like during his press conferences, post-game interviews and everything, it was always about her. So I was really impressed by him, kind of seeing how he kind of dedicated his whole, he went off in the first round as well. That like epic battle between him and Jamal Murray, and he kind of dedicated. For me, I kind of took it as he dedicated his whole performance to Breonna Taylor. So
I think he actually did admit after the series that it was for her. I know he was one of the biggest activists specifically for Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. I didn't even think about Donovan Mitchell until you said it right now. He was definitely another very big activist within the bubble. Personally for me, it might be kind of like an easy way or an easy person to say, but LeBron James for me has just been phenomenal as an athlete. An athlete and a person in general. Because I think that there's obviously that GOAT talk about who's the best player ever, MJ or LeBron. But if we're talking about GOAT in terms of as a player in general, or exactly, like a player in general in the NBA, I have to give that to LeBron. The things that he's done in terms of social justice movements, especially within the bubble, have just been incredible. He has his own campaign called More Than a Vote that he's constantly publicizing on his platforms. You can really tell that this is someone that cares about this a lot. It's always on his mind after every press conference. I believe that he would any question that wasn't related to social justice within the bubble, he would just not give it any attention and just repeat, like, say her name, say Breonna Taylor's name. I know we talked a lot about Jacob Blake after that shooting in Wisconsin. All of these issues that have come up, he's been really involved in it. And I know that he's donated a lot of money as well, like obviously through his More Than a Vote campaign. So for me, yeah, I think that what he's done off the court is probably more than what he's done on the court, just because of how amazing he is as a person. And I don't want to talk about it too much, but I know that there were some athletes that have called him out. Obviously, he didn't give them much media attention, but one of these players was or not players. One of the people that called him out was I believe an MMA fighter called Colby Covington.
Yeah.
This is a guy that decided to try to make fame off of LeBron James's name just by calling him out for being a spineless coward and a woke athlete that should just stick to playing basketball. I know that within a Trump rally, they were screaming "Shut up, LeBron" and other
LeBron sucks chants.
yeah, LeBron sucks and stuff like that, like other derogatory things towards LeBron James. I just don't understand how America has become so divided. I think that with this whole election process, the U.S. population as a whole can begin to heal. I know that we've seen Joe Biden come out and say that he doesn't want the people to be divided anymore, and he's hoping that the Republicans can give him a chance to come together and heal, so they can work together and create actual change within the world, and more specifically within the United States. So yeah, I think that stood out. He stood out for me much more than the rest of the athletes.
Yeah, and he's been not only during the bubble, but he's like been phenomenal as a person.
Oh,
like
this
you
has
said.
been constant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he has his own school, the I Promise School.
Exactly.
He sends like thousands of kids to college each year, paid for tuition. I think recently, talking about the election, I know in Florida he donated a couple $1 million so that former prisonees or like jail convicts could vote in Florida. So yeah, just an amazing human being in general, and definitely like inspiring, like the reason why a lot of people look up to him.
Yeah, also putting a lot of sorry, I'm trying to look for the word, a lot of impact on HBCUs, which are historically black colleges and universities. I know that a lot of the students that come from his I Promise school plan to go through these HBCUs kind of as a way to bring more attention towards these schools. And yeah, so that was another point that stood out to me as well.
And yeah, kind of just touching on the HBCU, kind of we're seeing a bit of change in the younger, I think Mikey Williams, he tweeted how he was interested in going to HBCU. Yeah. And we saw recently 5-star Makur Maker, younger brother or cousin of Thon Maker, he committed to Howard. He's going to be playing at Howard.
That's true, yeah.
This upcoming season. So I think there too, it's going to be very interesting to see if more top recruits kind of pick the HBCU path. And yeah, kind of use those schools, using their platform to advocate for change, social justice. Exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think that would be great and kind of bring those like low major schools up, because all it takes is 1 or 2 elite players to start that movement. And, I think after Makur Maker did it, he's kind of one of the pioneers of that movement. It's going to be very interesting. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, it wasn't an easy video for Johnny and I to make. We both come from a privileged position. So I hope you enjoy listening to our perspective on this whole issue and kind of like the results of the election. That kind of just to wrap up this video. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you liked it, drop a like below, and feel free to tell a friend about it and subscribe, because it helps our channel grow, and we really appreciate it, guys. So thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, everyone watching, we really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to have a special guest on the show, so stay tuned for that. Last week we had 2 weeks ago, we had Jane Bediako on. So yeah, stay tuned to our Instagram page at the Eurosteppers Podcast for who that special guest is going to be. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for tuning in, everybody.
All right, guys. Peace.